everyone, my name is Jeanette, and this is our third video in the Art Institute IGDA Game Art series. We're going to jump right in, and this is our third video, so we're going to be covering model sheets. We've already done an introduction to Photoshop and concept art, so now we're going to take that concept art and turn it into a model sheet that we can use to create a 3D asset from. So this is a concept I did of a character. Concept art is generally where you're designing your character. It can be rough, it can be detailed. You know, there are concept arts that look like complete finished illustrations, and there are some that are just sketches. It's really what you make of it. But it's about figuring out your character. So this is the front view of the model sheet. Obviously she's nude in this particular image, but the point is that you're showing it completely straight on from a front, side, back, top, bottom, depending on what you're using, and it's used as a blueprint for modeling the character. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So this is our concept art, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new document, and I'm going to make it, we'll say 6,000 by 4,500. And I'm going to fill it with the same base color. I like to have some kind of background color that isn't black and white, just because I find black and white, I don't know, I just find it a little off-putting for my eyes personally. I feel like it desaturates things. So just having a little bit of like a purplish gray there. And I'm going to lighten that up just a little bit more so that you can see the drawing a little clearer. And I'm going to get a dark color to draw with. And I'm on a new layer here, so I'm going to start naming these just so I don't get confused. So I'll call that sketch, and I'm going to call this one base. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to copy with holding Control-Shift-C to copy everything here, and then paste it into this one. So now I have a reference to my concept art in my new document. I'm going to go ahead and close my concept art. I don't need that one open anymore, and I want to save this right away. One thing that you want to get in the habit of is saving often, because losing work sucks. Also naming it appropriately. This one is SK_gremlin. And that's just the concept that the naming convention that we're using in our particular project. I'm going to name this reference. Okay. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out the proportions of my character. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And what I like to do is just turn the opacity on the reference image down a little bit. And on a new layer, or I'll just do it on my sketch layer, with a small brush, I'm using my basic smooth. I'm just going to very roughly kind of block in the shape of the character. I'm doing this very, very rough, very light. I don't need a lot of detail here. I just need to kind of figure out how it's broken down. So we have its kind of pecs there. And I'm also kind of trying to take into mind that this was drawn in kind of like a perspective view. So now I want it to be more of like a straight on view. So we're not actually going to be having it again in perspective view anymore. I'm going to draw it from a straight on. So I'm just doing this very rough because I just need to figure out the proportions. And again, I also need to keep in mind that the pose is going to be different, because right now I drew him with his arms very down and sort of out, but I actually want them to be more like out to the side. The reason I said again for this is because when you're modeling, doing it in a T pose is actually a lot easier. When you get into the animation stage, you won't have as much deformation, as much stretching and ripping and tearing and that kind of thing. It's a lot easier to get into. So just kind of figuring out his proportions. I can turn those off if I need to. Just look at him. And again, it's not going to line up with my sketch underneath because I am trying to align it better. So, for example, we're looking at this from the front, so this would probably come more straight down. And it'll also be longer because it's not being foreshortened. Okay. So that should be about it. as far as the face shape goes, I don't really need a lot of detail, just kind of like a brow line, some kind of generalization for where the eye is, the nose, and then we'll say the mouth is in here. So now I have like a kind of a very rough drawing of my character. I'm going to just take my selection tool and I'm going to select and then hit the delete key to just delete half of it. The reason I do this is just because it's a lot easier to draw half and then use a symmetry modifier for a character that's completely symmetrical. So there's no real need to do everything twice. So I have my little sketch. I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt, and that's going to make a duplicate. And then I'm going to hit Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. And now I can move that in. Ah, look, we have a symmetrical character. And again, this is not perfect by any means, but it gives you a kind of idea. So again, I want to move this arm. So I'm going to use my lasso tool to make a selection. I'm going to hit Control T to transform it, and then I'm going to click on this little white. It's like a target. And what it is that's the pivot point. So it's the area that you're rotating around. So if it's in the center, then you rotate the arm around that. But I actually want to create it like a joint. So I'm going to move that up to his his shoulder, where his scapula is. So yeah, where his shoulder blade would be moving. And I'm going to just rotate it from there. And that way I can give it a more natural arm lift. It's almost like he's moving. Say hi. So I'm just going to put it out to the side, and that works perfectly fine. All right. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my reference back on, turn the opacity all the way back up, and move it to the top layer. But I'm going to shift it over to the side because I don't actually need to have it on underneath anymore. I want to use it as a reference, but I'm essentially redrawing the character and just using this kind of as a guide. So I have my sketch here. I'm going to move it over this way a little bit by just holding Shift and dragging it to the side. I'm not really too worried about placement or scale within the layer at the moment. I made my canvas pretty big, so I know that the image will be nice and large. And that should be pretty good. I'm thinking from how I'm seeing him, if I go back here and I just look at his shape again, we have his head up here, and then his body is actually pretty wide, and I might have drawn him too narrow here, so I might need to widen his stance a little. And then his legs are going to look a little short, especially from the front, because they have a bend in them. You'll notice like it has that little bend. So sometimes it helps to break it down even to just like a really basic sketch and then go from there. So just looking at that, I'm going to widen him up a little bit. And bring the legs a little bit more wide. Okay. There's the knees, and then the foot is actually going to come down into the back. So essentially it's going all the way down here. So it's kind of like a tube all the way to the back. But then the toes are going to be in front, so it's kind of going to be cutting it off. So it's going to look a little odd from the front view, but that's just kind of how you have to interpret it. You have to say, this is a tube here for the thigh. We're going to have another one kind of that way, and then we're going to have another one that way for the toe. So if you look at that from the front, you're really only going to see this, a little bit of that, and then the front of the toe. So we have the thigh, a little bit of the calf, and then the toe. So that's what that is. Alright, so I'm going to just erase some of this extra stuff that I drew because I'm scribbling a lot. Alright, get my reference back up. And again, on a new layer sheet, actually I'm going to just keep working on this one. This is fine. I don't need another one yet. So just keep working on my sketch layer. I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit. And just start working on kind of finding out, just basically redrawing it. Like I said, we're drawing it from a straight on view. So it's really just about figuring out how to interpret, oops, that reference image here into our new pose. Keeping in mind things like this, where the belly, I'm going to turn that down a bit so I can draw over it again. The belly here is round. So as I kind of drew, the same in the last video, I kind of drew like a guideline to kind of curve out this way. You're not going to see that in this because it's essentially straight down the middle. But you do want to keep in mind that it also curves this way. So maybe we'll need a little pouch under his gut. A little more of like a love handle type look over there for his hip. Small, general kind of crotch region. We're not going for explicit demons in our game. A little bit of a knee cap type thing. I don't like the crotch region's a little too strong. Very, very subtle. There you go. Got his kind of a little bit of a flabby pec. And then he had kind of bony shoulders. And he has a little bit of muscle on his arm. You're not going to see too much of that because he's pretty spindly. So we want him to have a little bit, but not too much. We kind of followed a little bit of, you know, human anatomy, but we're distorting it. But it's still good to kind of keep in mind things like, you know, for a human, the fingers would end about mid-thigh. We kind of extended that because I wanted him to have long, dragging hands. So his go almost down to his feet. So what I would do down, if I want him to have his toes here, I can draw like an arc out to the side just to make sure that it's lined up, and it is, so I don't have to worry about that. Kind of bring his collarbone down. And you'll notice that I'm pretty much just focusing on this side of the drawing, and again, that's because I'm going to just flip it so I don't have to worry about drawing it twice. But that's completely optional. If you have a character that is less symmetric, you know, drawing each side individually is cool. I like to model things that are symmetric if I can, because it really does save quite a bit of time. And also, symmetry also helps with, you know, saving texture space, which is important. So if you have a character that you can reuse things from, it's always a good idea. I didn't feel this character really needed to be too asymmetrical because he's also a small character as far as his place in the world. You know, he's like a minion type guy. There's going to be many of him. So we didn't want anything that stood out too much. He's supposed to be a little on the generic side, I guess. Give him some kind of swirly horns coming down. Draw in some of those. He has kind of like a crustacean coating to him, so his skin is kind of smooth and shiny in places, and then in others it's much more hard, kind of like a carapace. Crustacean really comes to mind the best. The one thing I did notice is that I kind of neglected to give him a neck, which is actually what I did in the last one too, which is pretty funny. So I'm going to just make a selection of his whole head, get my move tool, and holding down the shift button, I'm just going to slide that up just a little. Don't want to be too long. His head is kind of sitting forward. So again, just going off the sketch here. Whoops. You know, just looking at kind of how he is set up. His back is arching, and then his neck will be coming forward a little bit, and then his head is kind of sitting there. So it's just important to think about how he's built. So even though his head might look like it's perfectly in line, he's not standing up like this. Yeah, this is not him. He's more like his head is here and his neck is coming out here, and then he's got a kind of back arch and a little bit of like a hobgoblin pout belly, and then his leg is kind of like a little bit forward and then a little back and forward, you know. So yeah, so just trying to keep in mind again how he was posed in the other build, the other version, so that we can interpret that correctly. You don't want to make the mistake of just copying it directly, because then it will be off. And that's again why we're just kind of drawing a completely new version. It's also a chance, I think, to fix things. You know, sometimes you'll notice stuff with your designs that, ooh, that looked really good that one time, and then you're kind of thinking about it later, and you're like, oh, I don't know. There's plenty of times when I was you know, done with the concept art, and then decided there was something else I liked more, or just something that would work better for the character. So I'm gonna give him these kind of like jagged, gross teeth, and I'm not worried too much about the details again with this version right now. I'm trying to keep the videos to a watchable length as well. So, you know, depending on your project, you'll probably want to spend a bit more time. But again, for me, since I am the one who's going to be doing the modeling, and I kind of know what it is I'm thinking, I don't need it as much detail. These kind of crustaceal claws. These kind of like holes in the middle. It's just basically two large bone structures coming down into two large claws. And make the pointer one actually a little bit longer. It got a little short in that sketch, so we want that one to just be a little bit chunkier. And that's just drawing into anatomy, you know, just like, you know, our pointer and ring fingers are bigger than our pinky fingers, so just kind of drawing in that a little bit. Just give it a little texture so we know that this is the area that's kind of more gritty, rocky. That probably won't actually be part of the modeling. The crustaceal texture is probably going to be mostly texture work rather than actual geometry, but it's still nice to include that. You can also use this as a reference for texturing, so it's a good idea to keep it in mind. So again, we're just going to give him a little bit of like he's almost like a little chunky, you know, he's got a little tub to him. Alright, here's the bottom of his kneecap. He has these veins kind of crawling up along his skin and down and all around. And then his neck is pretty wide, but it kind of starts narrow up at the head and then widens down. Okay. As far as the feet go, he essentially has like almost like a block leg. Like instead of you know, like a human leg would maybe have, you know, the knee and then the calf comes down, and then the foot is very solid, but it's very short and it gets very tapered in the front. Instead, his pretty much goes from the knee almost like a triangle type shape and then slopes forward, kind of mimicking the shape of his claw, where it has a split and then comes off into two toes. Just erase those a little bit. For an orthographic drawing, again, we want his heel and his toes to essentially be resting on the same line. So it might help if you draw a line for his toes to rest on. So we're drawing this from the front. And again, you can notice when I say orthographic, what I mean is, you know, if you were drawing this in perspective and we're looking straight at his toes, then the horizon line would be here, which means that his head would actually be above it, which means if we were drawing this in perspective, we would be looking at the bottom of his chin area. and even like his belly, we would see a little bit of the underside of his belly, so we would be looking more up at him from a very low character perspective, and maybe his feet would be more wide set because of that. So hopefully you can see I'm kind of sketching off on the sides a little bit. We're not doing a perspective drawing, we're doing orthographic, which essentially means everything is the horizon line, so nothing should be disappearing into the background. Again, okay, just make his claws. I'm actually going to widen the toe stance a little bit. I just want to emphasize that sort of wide set toes a bit more. Okay, so at this point I'm essentially done. I'm going to get my eraser tool, just turn the opacity up, and just clean up these sketches that I drew all over the place. I'm still on my sketch layer, so normally what I'll do is I will refine this once or twice, just because I do like to have some some level of pride in my work, and I don't mind it like this, but it's not perfect. It's certainly not, and it's not going to be again, because I'm trying to keep these videos somewhat short. So I'm gonna go ahead and again on my sketch layer, just make a selection on half of him, cut it in half, Shift Alt to drag it. Oops. Shift Alt and drag it to make a copy. Edit, transform, flip horizontal, and then I can move that in until it lines up. So now we have the front view of our little character. I can merge those layers now, so we have one layer. And I cut off his finger when I was erasing, so I'll just finish that up. Okay, so I noticed when I was going back to look at my video that it cut out quite a big section of making the back side. So sorry if this seems a little different. Later version, because I actually am going to be doing this twice, because I have the front version here and then I've already done the back, but it cut that off. So I wanted to go over that because creating the backside is really quick and easy. So just to do it again, what I did to create the backside there is basically just duplicate the front layer. So I'm making a copy of it, and I'm going to turn off that one and rename this one to back. And then what I want to do is get my eraser tool and just erase everything that's on the inside. The reason I'm doing this is because in orthographic drawings, your silhouette from the front and back, or from the right and left, should essentially be the same because there is no foreshortening. So if you have no foreshortening, then looking at a character or an object from the other side, it should have no difference. What is different is the details in between there. So you do have to do some redrawing, but it's a nice kind of shortcut to give yourself a really good starting point. So all we do is just kind of erase out all the stuff inside while leaving the basically the silhouette of the character intact. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And what we'll do now is we just basically start filling in details from the back view. So if this is the neck, then the neck would actually, whoops, wrong brush. So the neck would actually come up past, why is this being odd? Okay, so the neck would come up past there. Okay, and it might have, some kind of maybe like fat fold or something where like the base of the neck connects into the head. This part of the eyes would actually be cut off by, say, like the side of the face coming down, so we wouldn't actually see that. That way the eye is just kind of popping out around the actual cheek section. We're not going to see the scapula anymore. I'm sorry, the collarbone, the clavicle, that's on the front side. We'll now see the scapula. So, have kind of like a shoulder blade. And maybe we'll have some kind of ridges along the spine. Kind of like an inset. Kind of like a butt cheek. Butts are important. needs something to sit on. I'm going to give him a tail, but I'm going to do that on a separate layer. So for now, I'm just going to draw kind of like an ovular marking for where the tail will be. The reason I do this is because when I'm first modeling, I like to just focus on the shape, and if I have a tail here, then I might not be able to see correctly, so I find it helpful to do it that way. We're gonna be seeing the back side, so just keep in mind, you know, maybe now we're seeing the back of the knee, the back of the muscles there, and the legs. Instead of seeing the toes in the front, we'd be seeing the heel, so it's gonna be like a bigger, kind of chunkier opening. Kind of like more of like an ankle looking on the back side. Same thing with the arm. We're now seeing that come down into the elbow instead. Instead of seeing the front side of the knuckle like that, we're now seeing the back, which would be more like a crease where it bends. Remember that it has one knuckle, a space, and then a second knuckle, so there's two bony joints kind of areas where it should crease in. And then really just, you know, whatever other details you want to add. You know, perhaps this guy has more of the crab carapace type shell pattern on his backside than he does on his front. Maybe it has more veins. Depends on your character. If you have something that's very, you know, complex, or if he had clothing on, you know, you're basically just drawing the back side, whatever's on the back. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with the front, where we're going to delete half, Shift Alt drag, edit, transform, flip horizontal. Okay, so we flip it and put it back together, and now we have the back side. I can now merge those two together and have the back view. One other thing I want to do is I want to create a new layer that's just for the tail. The reason that I do this on its own layer instead of the same one is, again, because if I am drawing, or if I'm working on modeling the back view, the details on the tail might get in the way. So what you could do is you can leave it transparent like this if you'd like. Sometimes what I do if I want it to, you know, be solid looking, is I'll create another layer underneath it and just fill it in with like a fill color, so that way it looks more solid. So remember that labeling these is good, so we can call this one back view, this could be tail, and this could be tail fill. And then what I would want to do is put all of those inside a folder. You can do that by holding down Shift and clicking the folder. They all go inside. Now we'll call that back view. So now we have our front and our back, and you'll notice that the silhouette is pretty much identical. They're a little off, but pretty darn close. And that's it for that. I also cut off a little bit of the beginning of the side view, so just to show you how I set up for that. Drawing it is essentially the same as drawing the front view. You're going to draw in the basic blockings of it, but you can actually kind of take a shortcut with the side view, because now you have a front view. So what you want to do is create a new layer and call it guides, and then just get a nice dark tone and a small brush, and you basically just want to create yourself some guidelines. There's the bottom of his feet, there's the bottom of his knees, there's the bottom of his pelvis area, maybe like a slightly lighter one for the bottom of his gut area. His chin and shoulder pretty much is at the same height. Top of his head, top of his horns. You can create, again, some smaller, lighter ones perhaps at other areas. Maybe here's the point of his brow, top of his eye, bottom of his eye, elbow, top of his leg where his love handle starts. I think that should be it. Bottom of the pelvis as well. So now we have some guides coming off to the side. What we can do then is basically just slide our front view over. And again, I apologize about the video being weird. I actually have already done this. So let me make my canvas a bit bigger for this one so I have more room. Just fill that in. Okay, so what I would do is just slide that over and then extend the guides using the transform just so they're nice and long. So now we have guide going across, so we can line that up to everything. What we'll do now is create a new layer. We'll call it side, and basically what we're going to do is just start doing the same thing we did with before. We're going to use our reference images and just basically draw in the building blocks of our character. And we can use again, we can use these guides to give us some kind of help. We don't have to go just off of our concept art now because we do have, oops. Okay, so now what we're doing is basically in the side view, just doing the same thing we did before, where we're just building the basic building blocks using these guidelines to kind of figure out how our character is built and looks from the side. And that is about it. I apologize again, like this is not going to look exactly the same because this is the second time doing it. I have some kind of hotkey that I keep pressing on accident that makes my thing go all wonk wonk. So again, so I know exactly where I can stop these horns because I already know where they stopped in the front view, and the front and side is the exact same because it's orthographic. So that is why drawing an orthographic is awesome. Alright, so you'll basically just want to, roughly sketch it in, work on your proportions, kind of figure out how you want that character to be built and how it looks in the side version of it. And then the other video will pick that up a little bit further down, but it's exactly the same thing as the front view. Oops. And this is the bottom of his knee. Okay. And then from there, it's basically coming almost straight down into his heel shape. And you can also look at the back view if that helps. You can move the back view off to the side as well, and then just toggle the visibility on them. Using a combination of those will help you get the details you need. So the top of his kind of like heel bulge is actually a bit higher. So on my side view, I want to kind of give it a little bit more oomph there on the heel. Okay, I'm going to go back to my front view. And just looking at where his toes are, this kind of, again, it kind of comes out like a wedge almost. And then whoop. Okay. So for me personally, I normally do one version that does not have an arm, just so that when I'm modeling the body, I don't have to guess where I put these lines. I can say, oh, look, very clearly, here's where his sides are, here's where his hips are. And then I'll do the same thing I did with the tail and the back view. I'll just have the arm on a separate layer. That way I can I can turn off or on that model sheet and just look at that separately. Excuse me. So as far as the head goes, his face doesn't actually come out this far. I drew that out really far. He actually has a bit of a small head in terms of width or depth, I guess. It's quite wide, but it's not very big that way. So it comes out a bit more in the back, and that's again where we have those kind of fat folds. So can draw a guideline for that. It's right here. That's about right. Maybe a little boop. So, his eye is actually quite low, and that was one of the key features when I came up with the concept. I was like, I'm gonna do somebody who has their eyes like super duper low. So I'm just going to draw that. And then his mouth actually sticks out farther than his eye. So it has these kind of raised areas to create the side. And then his horn would be here. And the side view, obviously, as you can tell, coming from side to front, you know, changing that way is a bit more work than doing the front to back. That said, it's really important that you kind of take your time, figure it out. Don't be too stressed by it. Just enjoy the process. This is fun in its own weird way. It's like a puzzle. And obviously, you know, the better you are with like anatomy, the easier time you'll have with this, because you're essentially drawing the skeleton of the creature and putting it into different poses. So if you understand how it's built, then it's a lot easier to draw it in different ways. Just like, you know, I know a rectangle. I could draw it this way from the front view and this way from the side view, because I know that a rectangle is longer on the sides. So I know that that's how it's built. So same here, we're just basically breaking it down into sections. So his head is more rectangular in the front view and more like that in the side view. It's kind of like a prism shape. Okay. And I'm pretty much going to have to call it here. It's a pretty long video and I don't want to take too much longer. What I would do now is just kind of refine this, fix any anatomy issues. I think the face is definitely a little off, so I might redraw that part. And again, what I will do is turn that down a little bit and then draw the arm on its own layer. So just real quick. It's really important when you're doing the arm that you consider how your arm moves. Like if you look out at the side of your arm, like if I'm looking from the top, here's my head and I'm looking this way, and here's my shoulders. If I hold my arm out to the side, my top arm does not come out at a perfect 90-degree angle normally at a relaxed pose. It's kind of a little bit this way. And then from my upper arm to my elbow, there is a definite bend. So it's not out this way, it's that way. Okay, so your wrist comes forward. It's very difficult to put your arm like a completely straight pose unless you, I don't know, do a lot of stretching and or double jointedness or something like that. So make sure that you are considering that a relaxed arm will come forward a little bit. Also, this is raised in this view, so the arm, we're not drawing it flat at its side. You know, it's not like this either. That's not what we're going for. We're going for the same as in this front drawing. So you have to think, okay, here is the elbow. Okay, there you go. Now I have a guide. I know this is the top, so I draw a circle there, and I know this is the elbow, so I draw a circle there, and now I just connect the two. Keeping in mind the anatomy, things like, you know, how the muscles are going to be bending. And then from here, here's the elbow. Here is the height of the lower wrist, so I'm going to draw a circle kind of here, and kind of here, and connect. And again, I don't worry about it being too perfect here because I'm using it as a reference, not a rule. But the closer you are to it, the easier time you will have. So do take your time with it, especially your first couple. This one is, like I said, it's not. I probably wouldn't use it quite as is, but it's okay. It'll work. And then he's got the spikes on the back of his arm. So again, I'll clean this up a little bit probably offline because this is pretty much it. But that is pretty much done. So now you have a side view. I can go ahead and turn my guides off. We have a back view. I can move those, and we have a front view. So we have all of our views. And what we're ready to do is turn these into individual images that we'll import into 3ds Max and use it as a blueprint to make our model, and it'll be very accurate. So using this, as you can see, it didn't take that long, about an hour, and honestly it's a little easier when I'm not talking. So for a halfway decent model sheet, that's not too bad, and it will save you so much time when it comes to modeling. And that's what we'll go over in our next video, using 3ds Max to create a character. So I hope you'll join me then, and I hope that this is helpful. Thank you so much.